All right, everybody, welcome. It's been a minute, but we are back with another episode of Conversations with Cougars. And I've got a 2005 graduate, Drew Morgan. He was on that team that ended up breaking the long losing streak and had the most memorable defeat of Opelika. And we're going to get to all that good stuff. But, Drew, welcome to the show. And I appreciate you reaching out and making some time tonight. How's your world in Auburn?
Everything's going well. Kids are in school and working hard, and we're I, I'm thankful for normal these days. Normal life is good. So everything's rolling along really well.
Well, very good. Tell a little bit about your family and what life is like for you in Auburn, what keeps you busy during the day, and just share a little bit about the current version of Drew Morgan, and then we'll get back in the time machine and kick back to the old days.
Yeah. Well, I'm got your average working dad, and I work for Auburn City Schools, and have been working here for 15 years, and started teaching ninth grade history, coached eighth grade football, and about 5 years ago, I had an opportunity to move into a curriculum coordinator position for our district office, and I've been doing that for 5 years now. And while I'll always miss teaching and teaching history and being around the kids, I'll tell you, it's every day's a little different. And I wear a lot of hats, and so that's a lot of fun in this job. But live in Auburn, got two daughters. I'm married to a wonderful wife, Lori. We have two daughters, and they are 8 and 6, and so we are. It's a sweet spot of just a lot of fun stuff going on, dance recitals and soccer games and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean we're blessed. We love Auburn, and we love the town of Auburn, and so we're just raising our kids and going to church and trying to do things the right way. So
Well, very, very good. I know that when your children are 6 and 8, those years just fly by. So enjoy them now. Mine are way beyond that, and I remember those days fondly. There's not a lot of sleep each night, but you wake up the next day and there's new adventures, and that's for sure. Now, Drew, you were at Northview 2001 to 2005 graduate. Were you originally from Dothan? Did you go to elementary and middle school in Dothan, or did your family move at some point before you came to the high
yeah,
school?
yeah, born at Flowers Hospital, and went to Hurd. My mom was an elementary school teacher at Hurd Elementary.
Mhm.
She taught first grade for a while, and dad worked at the Michelin plant, and worked there for 35 years, and retired there a few years ago. And yeah, Hurd and Montana Street, and then I think Girard, and that's when they did the magnet school at Carver. So I played at Girard with Coach Ferris, and then Carver with Coach Ivy, and then went to Northview. So I was excited to get there at the time. It was fun.
Mike Ferris's first year at Girard, I was in seventh grade, so he had been there for a minute by the time you came through. Now, had Girard's nickname changed by that point? We were the Rebels back in the 70s and 80s. What were they by the time you came through?
No, that we were still the Rebels. We were
Mhm.
still the Rebels then. The I guess powder blue, royal blue, and gray, and
Mhm.
um, it was pretty colors. I wasn't so keen on Carver. Being I did grow up an Auburn fan, and so growing up an Auburn fan and a Northview fan, we always pulled for Northview growing up. Um, red and black always didn't sit too well with me, but
I suspect not. We got some legendary Cougars in the house. We got Jason Mullins, who was class, I think, of 92. We got Kevin Jackson, who I think was class of 91 or 92. Thank you, fellas, for dropping in. I've got Drew Morgan, class of '05. Drew was part of those teams that did not have much success until they whipped up on Opelika in '04. But we're going to get to that legendary game in a little while. Drew, what neighborhood did you grow up in, and did you play city sports? Who were some of your running around buddies back in during that time? What are some good memories about being in middle school before we get to the high school years?
yeah. my most of my I guess main years I was in Chapelwood. The nickname sometimes was Chapelhood, but Chapelwood, it was a great little neighborhood. A lot of kids lived there. Yeah, had a lot of friends that lived in that neighborhood, and our house was we had a bunch of woods, which I think now is I can't remember the name of the subdivision they built, Oak Grove something, but anyway, grew up playing in the woods behind the house and building forts and all the things, sneaking in the span farms, which we weren't supposed to do, but we figured out we could walk a trail over to that neighborhood. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, looking back now, I mean, it seemed normal, but it definitely, I feel like my age group might have been one of those last age groups that could truly be just kind of free range around the neighborhood, riding bikes everywhere and carrying BB guns everywhere and hunting for squirrels and birds in people's backyards, and nobody ever called the cops on us that I know of. So that was good. But
Isn't that crazy to think that back in my day too, of course, one, we had woods everywhere. I grew up on Selkirk Drive right off of Univista, and that was way before it ever connected over to John D. Odom. We had woods for acres and acres and acres. You could get lost back there. And you're right, taking BB guns and whatever else back there. Nobody ever came back there and checked on us. We
uh,
just knew that either when the street lights, you saw the street lights or you heard the whistle or the bell, you just knew it was time to come in. But you're so right. Your generation or your years may have been the last in a city like Dothan that you could do stuff like that.
yeah, and we later on at high school, well, I guess eighth grade, ninth grade, we moved out on Brandon Stand Road off of 84, a little bit farther west of town, and met my good buddy Will Bowie. He was probably I was closest to him through high school, and he lived on the same street, so it was kind of a match from there. And I've always loved being outside. I've always loved being in the woods. I've always loved playing in creeks, and if I could have it today, I'd be outside every day. So that was my childhood, and it was I was very blessed. Had parents that took care of us and worked hard, and um, have a lot of good memories from Dothan.
And were you always where your family moved to off of 84? Was that the house when you were in high school as well?
It was. It
And so
was.
were you always zoned for Northview? Was there ever a doubt, I guess is what I'm asking, that you might end up going to Dothan High?
I think once we moved to Chapelwood, we knew the zone would be Northview, because Chapelwood, that whole neighborhood was Northview, and so I think from then I was probably 5 or 6 when we moved to that,
Mhm.
and stayed at the house a while. So from that point, we started pulling for Northview. I can remember going to games with my dad, of course, and the Rip Hughes had an excitement around. I don't know if it was just being a kid and getting called up and everything, but there was always an electricity around Rip Hughes and going to those games. I can remember we'd always drive to the Enterprise game, because we lived on the west side of town, so it wasn't too bad of a drive to drive to Enterprise, and that was always a fun trip to go watch those games. And I can remember the Northview Dothan High game. I guess it was Gabe Gross senior year. I was there. I remember being really cold, and we were on the visitor sideline, and
Mhm.
um, winning that game. So that was memorable, and I always loved Northview's colors. I'm not a Florida State fan, but I've always liked Florida State's colors too. But I just think they're pretty colors, and the gold
You
helmets.
you may or may not know this, but when Harry Wayne Parrish started the program back in 1978, Florida State's colors were really the inspiration
Huh.
for what our colors came out to be. Now, when you were growing up, it was the end of the Billy Kennard era as the head coach, and it became the Emery Latta coaching years. And Latta coached us from 98 until, well, through your freshman year. And then you went Emery Latta, Mike Dubose, Levy
Yeah.
Boutwell, and Chip Harris. And we're going
Yeah.
to get to those in a minute, but I want to ask you, as a kid going to Northview football games on Friday night, say as a middle schooler, what was it like showing, seeing the lights and pulling up to Rip Hughes, knowing you were gonna get to watch the high school team that that maybe one day you were going to get to play for. Certainly, it was going to be your high school in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you daydream and well, I can always remember thinking like, I'm not ever going to be big enough. Like, the guys look so big, the older guys, when you're in middle school and,
Sure.
when you're young in middle school, they look like men. I mean, they're, good bit older and bigger and, um,
Were
all
there
the,
any guys were there any guys in your neighborhood who were on the team, or did you know any maybe through church or some other way?
I went to church at Mount Gilead outside of town. So I went to church with a lot of guys that played for Rehoboth and, uh, Wicksburg. So I didn't have as many Northview folks that went to my church, but there were a few guys in the neighborhood. Um, I mean, I wasn't a shy kid, but I didn't go out of my way necessarily to make friends with an older football player, but I definitely looked up to him. And Coach Ferris, I did go to church with Coach Ferris, and so I was close. I knew him, and so knowing that he coached and was involved in different ways and was coaching at Girard, that was a really good influence. I mean, he was such a model and well mentor for me growing up, just of how to have a family and how to be a coach and push you, but do it the right way. So yeah, I mean, but Rip Hughes going to games. I just remember. I mean, and I love going to. I mean, what kid doesn't? I love going to football games anyway. But Rip Hughes, it was always you'd pull up, you hear the band playing, and um, you get some boiled peanuts and sit there and watch a game and just take it all in. So I remember thinking it was huge, which I mean, I guess for a high school stadium, it's
It's
uh
pretty good
large.
size.
So
Yeah. What about one of my fondest memories is the smell from the bread factory across the
oh yeah.
parking lot. I don't know if it was still active during your years, but some of the more experienced families at halftime would walk over and bring loaves of bread back, and some of the folks in the stands would already have their containers of butter and butter knives they had brought into the stadium. So I don't know if that's a memory for you, but I know being on the field, it was certainly a memory I had. Your sense of smell is one of your strongest and more memorable, but I certainly could smell that bread.
Yeah, no, I remember that. Well, I mean, now that you say that, that's I definitely remember that. And and it's all I ever knew. So growing up too, I might have thought like, well, it's just that's is what, is what a football game smells like. But
Right.
I
That's right. It's too bad when you go to Bryant Denny or Jordan Hare. There's no bread smell like that. That's for sure.
no,
Yeah,
no.
Drew, did you play sports growing up? I mean, as a let's say a middle schooler, did you play football? Did you play other sports?
I did. I played soccer until I was 10, and then that's when I could start playing rec league football. I always loved football. I always wanted to play football. Nothing against soccer. I think soccer's a great sport, but I guess at the time, football and soccer maybe were the same season in the fall for the rec league, so you kind of had to choose. So I chose football, and I was on the Bombers. Played at Doug 2. Our colors were royal blue and red, and
Do you
uh,
do you happen to know any of the history of the Bombers, the City League Bombers team?
I don't.
Well, you need to learn some history. You need to
Okay.
get with Cliff Mendham and the Mendham family. I don't know if you know Cliff. He's a local lawyer, but Cliff's father or grandfather, no, uncle, I think, started the Bombers,
Huh.
and that team won the city championship. I don't know how many years in a row. It's kind of like Connecticut women's basketball team, winning the NCAA every year. The Bombers were the team for years and
Okay.
years. I don't know if you had that success your years, but in the 70s and 80s, there was no better team in the city.
That's not, yeah, I didn't know that. That's good. Well, yeah, I don't know if we had that kind of success, but I remember having a lot of fun. I just remember thinking this is the best thing in the world, getting to play football. And then I mean, once I started getting to play for my school, I mean, that was um just such a neat experience to combine with all the guys I've been playing with rec league and
Mhm.
put on school colors and at Girard. And
Was Coach Ferris the head coach, or was he one of the coaches?
He was. He
Mhm.
was. And that's when we started working out, and I remember him being really careful to teach us the right form and do it. And like I said, he did the right. And I coached eighth grade football, and so as a coach, looking back, I always just realized that he really did it the right way. He trying to keep us safe and but teach us to lift and so that we could continue to grow and develop. So um, yeah, and then just things kind of go quickly. Then it seems like it's fast, but looking back now, it went quickly, and I felt like in a blink of an eye, I was at high school, but I had some good middle school years. And I'll say this because this sets us up later.
Mhm.
We won games in middle school. We won games as ninth grade team at Northview, and so it's just the strangest thing what happened, and but
It
yeah.
it was. It really was. And I've had on the show many guys who played on those 01 to 04 teams, and we're going to get to that in just a second.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, the guys who were in your eighth grade class at Girard, did all of those guys come over to Northview, or did some split and head over to Dothan High as well? And that's usually the case historically. A few guys went to Dothan High, but most were zoned to Northview.
Yeah, I think most were zone. I'm trying to remember the progression, but I think Honey School might have been Honeysuckle might have been the seventh grade, Dothan High Middle School. There was also Beverly, so maybe it was Beverly.
Mhm.
But most of the guys that I played with at Girard, most of those people also went to Northview. So we played together at Girard and we played together at Carver. So that may be a little different. I don't remember when they pulled eighth grade out and moved it to a magnet school at Carver, but um, I might have been our group may have been one of the first or second.
Was going to say, I think it was in the early 2000s or the late 90s, because up through at least 94, 95, it was still a middle school system, sixth, seventh, and eighth. Like my years before that, my brothers as well, two younger brothers, sixth, seventh, and eighth was Girard for us. And then we went over to Northview for ninth grade.
Hmm.
Well, let's
Yeah,
talk about that transition a little bit, because, and I've talked about this almost on all of the conversations. When you go from being the king of eighth grade and you're at the school and you've been there for a couple years, or maybe just 1 year at Carver for you, you're kind of the big dogs on campus. But when you transfer or you go to ninth grade and it's a gigantic campus over there, unless you have older siblings and have had occasions to go over there for other events, it's kind of a shock. So,
yeah.
Drew, when did you first visit Northview's campus, and when did it sink in that I'm not part of the big dogs right now.
Yeah.
I got to earn my keep.
Yeah, no, my mom worked for the school system, so I feel like maybe I was able to go and one summer and walk around. I mean, I definitely went like schedule pickup or meet your teachers. But yeah, I mean, I remember it being just seemed like it was huge. I mean, walking into that gym and seeing that huge cougar painted across the back of the gym. I mean, that was just so impressive to me. And the idea that the locker room had showers where you could actually shower if you needed to. I mean, um, that, and I mean, that was just different. It just seemed not, I mean, legitimate's a bad word, but it just seemed like, yeah, this is high school. And then the commons area was, um, yeah, there you go.
You're talking about this bad boy.
Yeah. I hadn't seen that in a while.
Mhm.
Yep.
It it can be intimidating, and even your first weeks or months. Well, let me ask it this way: did you play football in ninth grade?
I did.
Did y'all have a program during your eighth grade spring where you came over and worked out or met the coaches or had any involvement with the high school at that point?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't remember having that. And I can remember showing up in ninth grade for the first practices as a ninth grader, and you're going to laugh. Where the softball field sits now was, and I don't know how it was for you, but it was just a dust bowl.
Hmm.
That's where we practiced. And no, the wind goes directly over the top. There's no wind down below. There's no water down below. You know, I played a million years ago, but where did the ninth grade practice, and where did you guys find yourself most of that time in
Yeah.
that spring and then into that fall?
I, you know, I feel like we practiced, um, well, by then varsity had the practice field that they had built with a track around it.
And that's always been there in one shape or another.
Oh, you were saying ninth grade practice.
If you're ninth grade.
Was. I think we practiced a lot in the field across the street from the varsity practice field, um, like in between 431 and the school.
Mhm.
There was a big
But
open area there.
we used to call that the good air. You got to practice up above on the main level where the good air was.
That's
And
fun.
there was good air and no air. No air was down in the bowl. But at least you guys had a space. Did they mark it off, or was it rocks and partial grass, or did they cultivate it a little bit?
No, I remember a lot of rocks and partial grass. I remember it being pretty, which toughened us up, I'm sure. But
See,
was
there you go with the life lesson right there, toughen you
life
up.
lesson. You don't
Guys,
need
I got Drew Morgan, class of '05, with us, and we're about to head into the Northview years after Gerard, after Carver. You're coming over, and the other guys who were on the team who did not come through Gerard and Carver. What other schools did they come from? Beverly or Honeysuckle or the county schools? Where did they come from?
I mean, I really think most of the guys, the core guys that I mean, and I'll think through like the senior group that really hung tight through all 4 years. I mean,
Hmm.
we had really played together and developed a bond back in middle school. I mean, I'm sure there were some people that came from um, other schools, but I mean, playing football for Northview when I was there wasn't necessarily the thing that everybody was beating down the doors to go do. And
Well, it had been some lean years. I've got I'll just pick up from '96, say the 5 years before you got there. 6-4, 6-4, 2-8, 6-5, 3-7. And then your freshman year started the losing streak, or they were 0-9, or maybe the losing streak had begun the year before. But
mhm.
Drew, let's go back to the Bombers for just a second. Did you have any of your buddies who played Bombers, Gerard, Carver, and Northview with you? Certainly, there must have been one or two at least, I would think.
You know, Anthony Spann, we went pretty far back. He lived in Chapelwood,
Mhm.
and he played receiver, um, varsity. I think he played receiver most of the time through, but we went pretty far back, and I don't remember if he was on but he might have been on the Bombers. He was just a great guy, and to play with. Um, yeah, I think he was. I think he might have been. And Anthony, if you see this, you can let me know if I'm wrong. But I really think he might have been one. Our rec league teams might have had 12 to 15 guys on it.
Mhm.
Um, that way, we played both ways and all that kind of stuff. But
And then guys find other sports, or they just fall out of love with the sport of football and they find other things to do. But I always like looking back to just see who did I play the most years of a particular sport
yeah,
with.
I hadn't thought about the Bombers in a long time. So here, now I want to go back and really try to see if Mom's kept any.
Well, I was going to say you may need a trip to Dothan to go look in the closet to see what kind of memorabilia
Yeah.
that's there. But let's go to ninth grade. Let's talk about belonging. As soon as you get to school, you instantly belong to a social group. I mean, a football team, it gives you an identity. It allows you to just, you see guys in the hall who may or may not be your buddies, but you immediately recognize each other. You give them the, you know, the head nods or whatever in the hall, because what that does, at least in my memory, that immediately attaches you to a social group, as opposed to 98% of the others in the incoming freshman class
Right.
haven't found their identity yet. You know, but a lot of the athletes do, I guess. But that had to have been a good starting spot from a social standpoint. Did you find, even though the team, even though the varsity team hadn't had success and didn't have the numbers that we had in the 80s, maybe in the early 90s, was it, I guess, was it a benefit to you to be, from a social standpoint, to belong to a team like that?
Yeah, sure. You know, I can remember working out in the summer, getting to know the older players. We didn't necessarily work out with in the same weight room at the same time, but you were around them, and there were sometimes either out on the field or whatnot, you're around them, and you're getting to know them, getting to know coaches, um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, getting to know your way around the gym, to know your way around the locker room, and
Mm-hmm.
that really made, um, you know, knowing the older guys, or them at least knowing who you are. Looking back now, I mean, I can, you know, although I mean, you're definitely kind of wanting to lay low, you know, and not get your head shaved or something, which none of that ever happened, but it was always the rumor, you
The
know.
threat,
Yeah.
the story that hung around that the new guys were going to be subject. Let me ask, I got a
Which
couple
looking
of
back
old
now,
heads. I got a couple of old heads who just dropped in who are teammates of mine. I want to know their thoughts about we're not going to call it hazing, but we all know what we're talking about.
wasn't
We
hazing.
got Butch Henderson, class of '85. We got Mickey Saffold. Both these guys were state champions back in the day. And what would you guys do to the freshmen, the new meat? What was the initiation? Kevin and Jason, if you guys are still on, let's hear what it was. But Drew, I can tell you, when you played varsity baseball, I don't know if the guys still practiced behind or played behind. We just had a practice field and batting cages. We had to play at Northcutt over at Westgate, but there's that nasty creek that's behind I guess back then it was the arts building, and you would have to be thrown. Most guys were thrown into that just nasty, nasty creek as part of the initiation. But I'm pleased to say that somehow I avoided that initiation. I don't know if that was part of it as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, and all that, you know, as long as it's harmless. I mean, looking back now, I mean, I was so scared of getting my head shaved, but like, I'm like, that wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, and it was hot anyway, so probably should have had
Well, I
my
was
head
going to
shaved.
say, and were you a lineman at the time?
I came in playing kind of a tight end
Mm-hmm.
lineman. I was kind of in between things, and but yeah, I started linebacker, tight end, that kind of position. So yeah, I mean, but they took care of us, and coaches took care of us, you know, and just getting to know like Coach Bruner and Coach Fleming. You know, they had been there a while, and they got to know you, and um,
Were they the ninth grade coaches at the time?
you know, I do believe Coach Bruner and Coach Fleming coached, and maybe Coach Ferris at that point. I think he might have started volunteering at some point, or not volunteering, but coming up to Northview to coach at Northview, instead of Gerard at some point right around there. But
Well, you
yeah,
you may have known this back in the day or know it now, but Janaski Fleming, who played at Dothan High, was probably one of the finest athletes in many years to come through the Dothan City schools. He was a remarkable athlete.
he would do things at practice. You know, I mean, he was, you know, probably younger than I am now then. And I can remember him, you know, he would do drills with us and run conditioning with us and work out. And I remember my jaw just dropping like, yeah, this guy is the real deal athlete.
Yeah, what is it? He was built different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
But no,
Drew,
it was a great place, and you know, just fun looking up to the older guys on the team, and I remember Adam Rollins was one of the senior football players that I always looked up to. I think his dad might have played at Northview also. I don't know, but he was a senior and he just played the game the right way and pushed us, but also protected a lot of the ninth graders and I can remember I think they were playing Opelika my freshman year and Tommy Jackson was playing for Opelika. He went on to play for Auburn and played for the Falcons.
Mhm.
And somehow I was a linebacker, so I had practiced with him or I knew maybe I got pulled up, I don't know. And somehow Adam was his job was just to take on Tommy Jackson all game. And Adam wasn't that big of a guy. But he just hit him and hit him and hit him and hit him. And, I mean, that was the kind of spirit. And I mean, and there's a lot of other guys that did that too, but he stands out as as an example to me as a freshman and somebody that I wanted to be like as I got older.
And
Um,
that's so important.
mhm.
Younger guys, ninth graders, and I don't know if y'all had any, if they did any kind of a system of mentors or big brother, big brother, little brother kind of a thing. But the fact that you're a ninth grader, you're sitting in the stands or maybe even on the sidelines for a particular game, and you're able to watch one of the players who plays your position or somebody who has just caught your eye. And even though they're up against such a superior individual opponent, it's pretty amazing that a guy like that could set the example.
Yeah, and Coach Latta ran such a good program. I mean, I know I was a kid then, but I can just remember thinking so highly of him, and I would have run through a brick wall for him and um, pushed you, challenged you, made sure got the most out of you, but also did it the right way. And you always knew where you stood. You knew it was never personal, which I think is a great mark of a coach. Um, and and there was a lot of, I mean, I remember, being really aligned at Gerard and Carver and he would come talk to us. And, um, I remember doing I think the dream is that your middle schools are kind of doing some similar philosophies and things as varsity to build up. And I know he had done some of that. And, so that pipeline into Northview was really smooth for me and what I think for maybe for the rest of the guys in my class. But
And, and I think it was always designed supposed to be like that. I know it was in the 70s, 80s, and maybe into the 90s. But as you're going through your freshman fall on your team, you guys, you said won some games. The varsity under Coach Latta didn't fare so well. They went 0-9 for the year. And it doesn't take very long during the initial stages of a losing streak to start impacting the psyche of the team, which then can bleed into the rest of the student body. And I don't know if you have memories during that freshman year, or maybe even to your sophomore year, how much of a topic piece was the fact that the team had gone defeated during that fall of 01 leading into the 02 season.
yeah, I mean, I remember being surprised because I mean I'm thinking these guys are huge and um and while I mean we hadn't had a ton of success the years before my freshman year. um I will say, and I know I've watched some videos. I know you like to look up old data and stuff, but I found our Northview's enrollment numbers, and I had never known this before, but and maybe you've seen it, so I'm going to share this with you. But our class, so 96, 97, there was 1,030. Northview was the 13th biggest school in the state.
Mm-hmm.
98, 99, Northview was the 25th biggest. Oh, 2000, 2001, 30th biggest. Then the next year, 36, next year, 46, next year, 47. So in a span of 5 to 6 years, we went from um, the 13th biggest school to the 46th. I thought that was really interesting and thinking about what the coaches, I mean, I'm sure they were seeing it as a kid. I didn't know and I didn't really care at the time, but
Oh, the coaches definitely knew.
um,
The coaches
yeah.
definitely knew. Drugo, I don't know
So,
if you have the data there, but whether now
yeah.
or later, Go look up the size of Dothan High School in 4A schools in the mid 70s before it split into Northview and Dothan. I think it was the largest high school in the state at the time.
Huh.
And even when the split occurred, Northview was still one of the top maybe 10 to 12, ultimately 6A schools. We were 6A when we won it in 85. They were 4A in
Mm.
81. But you're right. Going from in the top 10 or 15, whatever that highest ranking was during those years leading up to when you got there, and gradually smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm sure that's what the Dothan City School board looked at when they ultimately closed down Northview. But you're right, it makes a huge difference when you're playing against a program like Enterprise, which
Yeah.
is the entire county.
Right.
They probably are close to double in the
Yeah.
number of 10th through 12th graders. It makes a big, big difference.
And so I think I mean, we all loved Coach Latta and the staff. And like I said, thought so highly. And so when that happened, and now that I'm an adult and I've coached middle school ball, I mean, I know, and just watching coaching now, I mean, things happen, and adults change jobs and move on.
Yeah.
And but that was a big hit. I think losing the games, but then also coupled with enrollment just dropping like a rock. Um, less and less guys wanted to come out, and um, yeah, I mean, but I still kind of, I mean, we had won some games. I'm not going to say we were great at Girard and Carver, but we had won some games. So kind of in the back of your mind, you're like, well, they didn't win a game this year, but I'm a sophomore next year, and I'll be on varsity or playing JV and dressing out of varsity, and we're going to try to get it back. So
But then Latta leaves and Dubose comes in,
yeah,
and that I don't think was ever a good match for anyone on any level. And I'm not asking you to comment unless you want to, but it was only the one season, and then we moved on to Coach Boutwell.
yeah. I mean, I can remember ESPN being at the school, and
Hmm?
I can't imagine going from being the football coach at the University of Alabama to coaching high school 1 year later. I mean, the shift for a man to make mentally of just what I got to do to be successful. I mean, that had to be incredibly challenging for him looking back now.
Oh, I'm sure, and we won't get into his story tonight, but that you can Google search all what created his situation to not be at Alabama and to come back to the Wiregrass. But that was just never a good fit. It really wasn't, and it wasn't even plugging a leak. It was actually creating more of a problem that led to Coach Boutwell. And then your senior year was Coach Chip Harris, which
Right.
I know Chip, and I don't know Coach Boutwell, but I know Chip, and I know Coach Latta. But going to Coach Harris, was it just a breath of fresh air? Was it a change in the mindset and the culture in the with the team and in the locker room? Kind
Oh
of,
yeah. 100.
you'd been through your fourth coach in 4 years, but now going into your senior year, what was it like having Coach Harris on board?
Oh, it was incredible. I, you know, you'd be hard pressed to find any school in the nation that's had four coaches in 4 years. I'm sure the list would be short over the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we never had a consistent off season program.
Mhm.
Um, we had player led workouts every off season, but those aren't as good as coach led workouts. And um, learning a new system. And listen, I learned a lot from Coach DeBose. I learned a lot from Coach Boutwell. I mean, I got to hear a lot of stories from Coach DeBose that were really interesting. But he was making an adjustment. He ended up being a really successful high school football coach. So he made that adjustment. And then Boutwell was just a legendary old school. Like I probably he was old school. I mean, he was we'd get after it, but
Well, he was cut more in the cloth of Coach Billy Kennard, who you didn't play for. Coach Kennard was old school. I
I
mean,
mean, Yeah.
legendarily old school.
I mean, yeah, I mean, at the time we were a little, I mean, some of the, I mean, nothing bad, but just kids in 2004 or I guess 2003 just weren't prepared for, that kind of old school coaching anymore, probably. But I learned a lot from them. But yeah, so Coach Harris came on, and I'll be honest with you, by this time, and what's hard is that DeBose and Bowell, and again, I learned a lot from them, and I know adults make decisions and they move on. But the hardest thing as a player was all season, the coaches are preaching, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit. You don't quit on your team because everybody, I mean, once you're 3 seasons into a losing streak and you're getting beat, you're working your butt off all off season and all fall, and you're the laughing stock of the town because you don't ever win, but you're trying hard and you're working hard. For them to leave, which again, adults make those decisions, and I'm not blaming anything, but it did hurt as a kid. It
Well,
was hard
sure,
to do
you're
that.
17, 18-year-olds, and you're trying your very hardest. I don't know how many of the guys in your class quit the team as and then it's normal to lose guys between ninth and 10th and 11th. But by your 11th and 12th grade years, most guys stick through those last 2 years because they've come through all the other. But when you're sitting on a 30-game losing streak going into your senior year, do you remember player-led meetings? Do you remember these tough conversations about sticking together and going through the wars together, win or lose?
Oh yeah, we the core group of our senior group, um, I mean, we would have, I mean, that's all we knew to say is pull everybody in and say, hey, we're not gonna quit. Let's keep going. And it was hard. I mean, I've been blessed to have a pretty easy life, but I have walked through some hard things. And I'll tell you this, just about every week, and I'm not exaggerating, just about every week I think back to that experience and think, yeah, this ain't as hard as that.
Well,
um,
and that is we talk about life lessons and what team sports teach us that as kids we don't fully appreciate until later in life. But Drew, I can't think of from a sports perspective a tougher lesson to learn from an experience standpoint. Not that you were on the sidelines watching the team across the city go through it. You guys were living through this extremely dark period in our program's history. But do you remember? And we're leading up to the Opelika game, of course.
and I never thought about Coach Harris, so I want to come back around to that.
And we certainly will. But there's always a pivotal moment in our sports careers, no matter how far we go in sports, middle school all the way up through the Hall of Fame or whatever sport you're playing. There are those key pivotal moments along the way. They're kind of markers, if you will, that you remember, that maybe you got your first touchdown or you made a key block or you passed 200 pounds lifting, whatever they may be, milestones. Leading up to Opelika, do you remember having such milestones that kind of gave you a preview that we were going to break this winning streak at some point? There was this improvement as a group or maybe on individual levels that you recall that just kind of stuck with you.
It's funny you asked that. So, first game senior year, we played Bainbridge, and I had forgotten the score, but I looked it back up, and I had forgotten that we got shut out. But I think it was we got beat 20-0. So on paper, it seems like it wasn't. But I after that game in the locker room, I can remember breaking down in tears. And I'm a 16-year-old, 17-year-old football. I mean, I didn't cry, or I'm tough guy all the time, but
Sure.
I remember sobbing in the locker room, and I can remember, I don't know if it was Coach Henderson or Coach Bruner or somebody, Coach Ferris, maybe, because I was close to him, coming up to me, and they were kind of consoling me about the loss. And I just looked up, and I mean, I can remember this, and I can say, we're going to do it this year. Like something about the way we were coached, something about the flow of the game. It felt like we actually competed instead of just getting bludgeoned, you know. And again, nothing against other coaches previous years, but it felt different. And I just bawled in that locker room because it felt like it was going to happen this year. And a lot of that, all of that was really Coach Harris and the vision that he said and the way he coached us and the assistant coaches he brought in.
And he
So
had had
that
a
was
lot
the
of
moment. Yeah.
success. Coach Harris had built programs and been successful before coming to Northview, and I think that's one of the things that was appealing to
Mhm.
those who brought him in. But the way you're describing the emotion that poured out of you, it was like it was right there for the taking, and you just didn't quite have enough of the puzzle pieces just yet. Drew, I want to welcome Austin Emfinger. I want to welcome Matt Rugger, and we've had a couple others roll through that I'm sorry I didn't catch who it was. Drew, take us kind of, if you will, a little bit through the season, and you're seeing signs of improvement, and Coach Harris is doing his very best in his first year to keep the expectations high, keeping the emotions in check. Was there any doubt by you or your senior teammates that you were going to quit or that you didn't want to see this through?
I'll be honest with you, and I'm so glad my dad, Ronnie, um, and he was super involved in Booster Club and very involved, and so I'm thankful for that. But between my junior and senior year, one summer after a workout, I came up to him and said, "Dad, I do not want to play football this year. You know,
Mhm.
I just don't know if I can do just never win. You know, just working, doing all I can, and just for nothing. You know, and getting laughed at all the time. And of course, he, you know, taught me straight, and of course, I didn't quit. I mean, that I was just tired or something, but you know, that was tough. But once the season got rolling and Bainbridge felt like we all felt like this is different.
Mhm.
Um, you know, the season went okay. We lost at Auburn, and I don't remember. I remember I kind of well, I don't remember much about that game. And Enterprise, we had a good game and we competed. I think most of the games that year, I wish I could see a box score, but I believe most of the games that year we were in it around halftime. Almost every game at halftime, we were maybe a score or two down. Not we weren't down by much. Um, and because of our depth, just kind of wore out in the fourth quarter, and the other team usually would score a touchdown or two and pull away. But
Well,
um,
I'll tell you this, that team gave up the least amount of points in a season in the six previous compared to the six previous
huh,
years.
I know
So
we didn't give up more than 30 in a game. Um, and that's Coach Torrance and Coach Henderson. And there may have been some other defensive coaches, but I know that they were my position coaches. And Coach Torrance, both of them, but especially Coach Torrance, I can remember him being you know, just from my perspective, a really great defensive coach.
yeah, the team Phoenix City was the only team to score 30 points on the defense all year. I'm looking at it right here. You guys, you played Bainbridge at home, at Auburn, Enterprise at home, at Selma. You stop me if there's any memories in these. You
The
played
Selma
Fairhope.
game, the Selma game was where it really like we were close to winning that game. And
22-20 was the score. The final score was a loss,
oh,
but that was an extremely close. Now, it wasn't so good against Fairhope, got shut out against Fairhope. But then you had to travel to Smith Station, to Phoenix City. Then you were the visiting team against Dothan, and that wasn't a close loss. But then comes the Opelika game, October 28th, 2004, at home. I want you to take us to that game and why, what happened, what was the magic for that game?
yeah. Well, I got to say first that I got hurt the week of Dothan during practice, and I played in the Dothan game, and that game was again, that game was close until the end. So I always have to say this, but I was injured for the Opelika game. And so was two of the other starting seniors, Will Bowie and Jara Black. I think Will tore his ACL and Jara was a running back and he had gotten hurt somehow. And Will was a guard. And so we had a underclassman playing guard. We had underclassmen playing a running back. Um, we had a second string guy. This tells you how our depth. I played both. I mean, I was not necessarily a great player. I was average at best, and I was playing both ways, guard and linebacker, in a 6A school. Playing both ways, which
Well, I was going to say that's kind of rare for 6A. I don't know if you knew this, but Opelika was a playoff team that year.
so that game got can or rescheduled from a hurricane. We were supposed to play Opelika earlier in the year. And the year before that, we got beat like 73-0 by Opelika there. I mean, Spence McCracken and Opelika. I mean, I call his name out because I can remember him just continuing to call Hail Marys with like 10 minutes to go in the game. They're up by 50-0 and they're throwing Hail Marys and just scoring. And later on, I found out the whole story when he was at Lee and y'all's team coming back and beating him, and he vowed never to take it easy on Northview again. And
Sorry.
yeah, it's okay. And that was actually the first game I started, so I remember that. But yeah, so I mean, there was all that history with Opelika, and so the game got moved to the end of the season. And after we had, we thought we really had a good chance against Dothan. We were really pumped up for that game. It didn't work out the way it should. That was my last play against Dothan. I can remember it. And when I got injured, but so good. So leading to Opelika, we had a lot of underclassmen. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, it was really bleak. I mean, we believed it was bleak, but the school around us came together. I mean, the school spirit was incredible. The Dothan week before and then the Opelika week. I mean, just the faculty, the staff, the administration, the students, I mean, they were all pulling for us. And it was like a family, like nobody else outside. Well, I won't say nobody. Our fans, our family, people who followed Northview got it. But everybody saw what we were going through and they wanted us to win, And so leading up to Opelika week, it felt different. And a lot of underclassmen played, a lot, and several freshmen played. And so it was Halloween weekend. It was a full moon for what that's worth. And the game had been rescheduled. Opelika was a playoff team, but Opelika, from what I remember too, they were trying to get home field advantage, I think. They needed to beat us to get home field advantage over Auburn. And this is a neat story. When I was coaching at Auburn, 8th grade football, I met some coaches who were coaching then. And when they found out I played for Northview, they said, we listened to that game. We listened to that whole game. We were rooting for y'all because we needed y'all to beat Opelika, and we didn't think y'all would do it. And we went crazy when y'all beat Opelika. And so I thought that was neat. But the game started, and I was doing my best to support the guys from the sideline, which still, I'm not gonna lie, that it hurts me that I was injured that game. But also, like, we had some really talented, we had more talent. The freshmen and sophomores had a good bit of talent, and I think that showed in the records after my senior year because Northview ticked up a good bit. And it helped us, and coaches had a great plan and just ran the ball. Justin Brooks and AJ Batts. Coaches had a great plan for them, and we didn't throw the ball a lot. We ran the ball, chipped away. We never scored an offensive touchdown. John Knight ran a fumble return back, 90-yard fumble return back, and that was the only touchdown of the game. Defensively had a tremendous plan. And Opelika was good. I mean, Steven Ensminger was their quarterback. His dad coached at Auburn and LSU, and I think he walked on at Auburn as a quarterback. And um, they had, of course, Opelika is always loaded with talent. And so, yeah, I mean, I still can't explain it. I mean, I don't, and not to take anything away from us, but I don't know if they were resting some of their star. I mean, I don't want to say that, but I mean, a win's a win, and I know Spencer McCracken wanted to beat us as bad as he could, and
He always wanted to beat Northview. And I want you to take us, the clock is winding down. It's the fourth quarter. You're on the sidelines. You can feel it on the sidelines. You could probably feel it coming from the stands.
yeah,
You know that Northview's going to win this game. And I'm sure at some point the collective breaths on the Northview side were being held until that final
yeah.
0-0-0 on the clock. Take us to that moment of just pure jubilation.
Oh well, I mean, we had never won a game before. Well, I mean, we had won games JV and freshman.
Mm-hmm.
We had never won a varsity game before. I mean, we really didn't know what to do. I mean, we didn't know how to act or react, and I mean, as the clock ticked down, there was this sound and energy from the stands, and I can remember the PA announcer telling people not to rush the field, which I never thought I'd, you know, you. I mean, we had never won a game, so I never thought I would be a part of a game where the announcers asking people not to rush the field, and you're looking around like, what's about to happen, and
Yeah, how did that go?
well, and and I think we had to run the clock out. I remember watching and we had to get a first down or two to run the clock out and just every play it got more real and more real. And just I remember thinking back just all the practices and workouts, and I think by then we maybe only had 9 seniors who were still playing and 3 of us were hurt. I mean, we were just beat down. And I mean, then the clock went 0, and I mean, it was I mean, it sounds dramatic, but I mean, I'm not being over dramatic. I mean, it was just a jubilant scene of crying and laughing and running around and hugging and um, a lot of the coaches were crying and players were crying and
Well,
other
Drew,
students.
it's 4 years of pent up emotions that no one had been able to experience because there had not been that same experience for 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't any words to describe it. I mean, I've always said that one win and the celebration from that one win was probably worth more than if we had won, a ton of games and it was just kind of ho hum, we won another game. I mean, that was like winning a state championship. The celebration and reaction from that. I've never won a state championship, but I can imagine it was very similar to winning a championship. I mean, because
Shirley C sure says that. Sure,
wow.
Shirley C, who's been there for all of it, and by the way, is the memory of Northview, period, regardless of sport or anything else. In her description, it was the equivalent of winning the state championship. It meant that much to the student body, to the teachers, to the administration, to the families involved.
Well, I remember being bittersweet because I didn't get to play, and Will Bowie and Jara Black, who I was really close to. I mean, none of us got to play in that game, and to speak to amongst the celebration and stuff. I remember either Coach Harris or Coach Henderson. One of the two came up to us and made it a point to tell us that we were a part of it, and so that was really nice of them to do. But yeah, I mean the students rushed the field, and I watched Coach Harris's interview, and he talked about the day after because that was a Thursday night game.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, the next day at school was just, I mean, I didn't have any classes where teaching and learning was going on.
I don't think anybody had any such classes. Drew, the celebration. Tell me if this is any accurate. There was a lot more celebrating than there was educating that day and through the weekend.
It was when so everybody went back to the gym that night, and
Mhm.
there was a celebration in the gym when we got there. And then at some point, everybody went home, and the next day, I mean, the campus was just buzzing. They had this impromptu pep rally, and it wasn't about us. And I'm talking a lot about the group. I mean, it was the school was truly celebrating because we had all been through just. I mean, it wasn't, it was hard and
You
it
know
wasn't
what you're describing and others who went through that are describing is school spirit that was there in the late 70s into the mid 80s when we were having such successful teams. And and I don't mean to take away from your story or experiences, but school spirit during that time period, I'm sure, was unmatched with a brand new school with 2 state championships in the first 8 years. And
right.
so you guys got at least a taste of that in a small concentrated period of time. And I'm sure that must have put you guys on cloud nine during
Oh,
that
yeah.
period.
They had everybody was in the commons area and they walked us in and had like a tiger walk kind of thing. And I can remember it being so crowded. They wanted us to sit and it was so crowded. There wasn't enough room for everybody to sit, and I just, you remember little things like that. And you're thinking, God, everybody, I mean, and sometimes students are in an area but everybody was celebrating. I mean, I don't think there was anybody that was too cool for school. And I mean, everybody was caught up in what had just happened. And it felt special, I mean, it was, we kind of all felt like history had just been made. I think it was also the same week that the Red Sox had won the World Series, actually. Um, I think the Red Sox had
I
won the
think you're
World Series.
right. I
Yeah.
think you're so right about that. It
That just came,
probably felt surreal and that this just happened kind of a mindset.
it felt like a dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so thankful for the coaches. I mean, they had great game plans all year. That Smith Station game, we lost by, I guess, 2 touchdowns. No, 10 points. But yeah, I mean, they had great game plan that game. I mean, so they had just stayed in it too, and they wanted it. And I can remember Miss Andrews, assistant principal. She loved us. She wanted us to win as much as anybody, and not just about winning. She wanted us to feel success, and so yeah, it was incredible.
Well,
But
Drew, you had some faculty who had been there from the beginning of the school in 77, 78 time period. They had gone through the good times, they'd gone through the lean times. And what you guys did on that night was you brought back shades of memories of those good times again. And you at the time, you wouldn't have appreciated that because you're a high school kid. You don't know, that's you're not supposed to know those things. But
right,
those what you guys brought that night to that administration, to those teachers, to those families who have been part of the school for all those years, you brought back some glory. You brought back some memories. And you mentioned something just a minute ago that I thought was so wise and so smart of your coaches to the three of y'all who were hurt that year, but you were at that game, but you were seniors. That game doesn't get a W without the contributions of you guys in the weeks and months and years leading up to there. Whether it was on the field by example or off the field by your leadership, you set the tone for the younger guys who produced on that day.
I appreciate that. I mean, when you don't win in your high school football, there's not you don't have the confidence there a lot of times, and whether or not you've been doing it the right way, or maybe the problem is you, right? Maybe the problem is the senior group, but that meant a lot. And I can say, I mean, we did work hard, really hard. And I don't keep up with the guys as close as I would like, through Facebook and stuff we do, but the bond we had between those and the things we learn. I mean, the Lord used it to teach us all kind of lessons, and why we needed that lesson, I don't know, but the Lord knew we needed it.
Well,
And
let me put it into perspective in the history or the context of the 41-year program of Northview. That win is one of the five most important wins, five most important games in the history of the program. And if you
wow,
really think about that, you're talking almost 500 games in 41 years, and that win is in the top five.
I didn't realize that. So
Mhm.
that's good. Yeah, I mean, and to do it against Opelika, I mean, that was just sweet irony.
It is. It is. And again, I'm not going to really apologize for what we did in 85, but
Yeah,
you were part of that.
yeah,
We
no,
got a couple more minutes, but before I get you out of here, you shared so many lessons. You shared, even as a 16, 17, 18-year-old high school student, you and your classmates, the guys who stuck through it, your teammates, you guys were more wise beyond your years than you probably appreciated then or even now. Because Northview football could have folded. That program easily could have disbanded. There's so many other sports that those guys, because most everybody played multiple sports back in the day.
right,
But after you graduated, as you said, the team did find more success, but the groundwork was laid by those years that you guys were there. And it springboarded. The team won 4 games the next year, 5 the following year, 6 the next year, all under Coach Harris's leadership. So whether you just look at that one game or if you look at the years leading up to that, that's laying a foundation under Coach Harris's first 4 years that was nothing but an upward trajectory. And frankly, and I know I've heard him say this before, y'all senior your class made that possible because you laid that foundation.
wow, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, at the time when you're a kid, you don't think through all that. But I mean, we just I think in the end when it got really dark there our senior year and it looked like it wasn't going to happen and it looked like we truly were going to go, because that's the other drama in this is that, I mean, we're playing Opelika, so like we're trying our best, but like we're probably going to lose 40 games in a row, right? Like everybody's thinking that. I mean, it's highly unlikely. I mean, it was pretty dark, but I mean, obviously that didn't happen, but it was our relationships. When I think back, it was the relationships we had with each other that I mean, there were times when our own, some students would, why are you playing? Y'all stink, that kind of thing. I mean, but it was our core guys. I didn't want to let, Jeremy Thomas or Joe Campbell or Will or Josh Smith. I mean, I didn't want to let some of those guys,
Mhm.
Josh Smith, I didn't want to let them down. I didn't want to quit on them, and they were out there still working, so I was going to be out there working. And if we didn't win a game, and we were prepared not to win a game. We were prepared to go all 4 years at Northview with 4 different head coaches and not win a game. And we still would have learned these lessons, but the Lord was good to us. And I mean, I don't think the Lord cares about our winning and losing, but I maybe He did give us one.
It's
One.
not the it's not the wins and losses. It's how you deal with the wins and
Yeah.
losses. You guys could have gone 40-0, but if you're going to act a certain way that is not beneficial to the fact that you have all these wins and you're not helping society and it doesn't help you build your character in a good way for the greater good, if you will, what good is that versus a team that finally breaks that winning streak? And I am sure in your years of coaching and teaching, you have leaned on those lessons and shared those lessons. And I am sure your 2 daughters will hear those lessons if they hadn't heard them already about how life treats you and how you deal with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think your class is an underrated class, the '05 football players. I think it's an underrated class. I think that it is their story needs to be told more because those stories are more, I guess they're more impactful than teams that win the state championships. You know, the Northview team of 81, which is largely the greatest team in the school's history, they went 13-1. They had stars out the wazoo. They had guys who went D1. They had guys who played in the pros.
Wow.
It's a very different story than my year. 85, we were 1-3. We ended up winning 10 of the last 11. We came back, had 5 overtimes. Anyway, my point being is each of those seasons are completely different. And it's easy to show, oh, we had all these great players on these teams and we did this and that. Everybody can tout those things. That's not the lessons. The lessons are in those teams of 05, the seniors of 05. How'd you deal with it in the seasons of 04, 3, and 2 that led to that one win, impactful win, top 5 win that frankly, if somebody wrote the story on the history of our program, I'm putting that as probably one of the top 2 or 3 chapters of our program.
Well, the outside perspective looking in, I mean, I definitely appreciate hearing that. I mean, and I'm proud of what we did. I mean, I'm humble, but I can acknowledge that I'm really proud of our group. And, it hurts a little that our alma mater, at least I guess the name isn't there anymore, but, I'm proud of our group. I'm proud of those guys and the relationship and what we walked through. And just how hard it was. I mean, and it wasn't the practices. Football practices are always hard, but it's just the never getting a reward and never, and like I said earlier, being the laughing stock of the town. And, but you just keep going at it because you got these brothers. And there was one senior named Joe Campbell. And Joe, I mean, we all were fighting for Joe. I mean, if he was on here, I mean, he didn't get to play a lot, but he loved Northview and he loved the team. He never quit. He practiced every day. He stuck it out. I mean, he's one of those guys that maybe didn't make an impact on the field, but he made an impact on all of us in ways that was more important than any impact on the field.
Those are the very best of teammates. That's the glue. I want you to go back and watch my conversation with one of my buddies, one of my teammates and classmates, Keith Rice. Keith was one of those guys, and he's one of the keys to success for our team. Didn't play much, but he was there for every bit of it and did everything that was ever asked for him. And it was so important, so impactful in his life. He proposed to his wife on our practice field.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Sure did. Keith has been a successful educator in South Alabama, now over in Louisiana for many, many years, but a fabulous guy. Drew, I could keep you here forever, but I want to be respectful of your time. This has been one of my favorite conversations that I've had because as an outsider, a much older outsider, and suffering from afar from what you guys went through, you were in the eye of the hurricane and you came out at the other end of it on top and so much better off. It doesn't matter what the scoreboard or the record book says, because what you guys came through, I think, just proves to me why you play team sports and how important that brotherhood is for those guys that have been through. And I don't want to age you, but you've got a 20-year high school reunion not too far into the future. And I guarantee you, if you get that group of guys together, some of those stories are going to start flowing and the laughs, maybe even some tears are going to be shed. But that's what it's all about. That is what it's all about.
Yeah, no, I mean, and thinking about stuff and getting ready, it hit me. It was like, this fall is going to be 20 years. And, I mean, it's like, wow, I don't feel that old, but yeah, it's been 20 years. And so, and I said, man, we need to get, whether the class reunions these days, I mean, I hope it happens, but with Facebook and social networking, media and all that, but I want to get at least those seniors back together this fall. So if any of y'all end up watching this, I wanted to do this for y'all. I hope I've told the story of, I mean, I just had one perspective. It was my perspective. But I wanted to honor those guys too. And I would love to see y'all. So let's, we definitely need to try to plan something this fall. And
I hope it happens. And Drew,
let me say this too. We did lose one of our guys this past year, Jerry Thomas. Um, I played guard and he played left guard. He played left tackle. He passed suddenly this past year. So yeah, that was sad, but we have a lot of fun memories, and he was a tremendous guy and a tremendous dad, and he'll be missed, but even more reason for us to get together and remember him and remember each other. So
well, thank you for that. I'm very sorry about the loss of your teammate and classmate, Jerry Thomas. Drew, I'm trying with these conversations to tell the oral history of the Northview football program. And as we've seen tonight, why these conversations are so important. Memories fade. People don't want to come on. They do want to share. They don't want to share. But conversations like yours, I think, are just invaluable. So I applaud you sharing all of this, the good, the bad, and everything else in between. So I'm really hoping that we'll get going again on these conversations. But before I sign off, don't drop off on me. If there's those of you out there, Drew reached out to me several weeks back wanting to share this. If there are those of you who haven't been on here, don't know me, just reach out through our Facebook group or however. I'm all over social media. You can find me anywhere. I want to keep telling these stories. I don't care how much you played. I don't care what position you played. You could have been a manager, a trainer, a cheerleader, a coach. We want to tell the oral history of all of those who were part of the 41 years of Northview High School football. So thank you, guys. Thank you again, Drew, and I hope to see you guys again pretty soon.
thanks.